Hello dear students, welcome to this lecture on the topic strategic approach to industrial relations. The subject is strategic human resource management and I am Dr. Tripti Barthwal. I am director, Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management and Development Studies, Lucknow. So, I am sure you must be aware about what industrial relations is, and you have studied an entire paper of industrial relations. So, industrial relations or employment relations, we call them employer relations, also studies the employment relationship, that is the complex interrelations between employers and employees, trade unions, employer organizations and the state. In the entire paper of IR or employee relations, ER what you call it as, you must have studied that in an industry, in an factory, in an establishment, one side is the management side, the other side is the worker side or the employee side, and there is a complex gamut of relationships which exist between these two parties, and then there is a role which is played by the government as a policy maker, as a lawmaker, as a controller, as a monitor, and then there are employee representatives or the unions on one side, there are employer representatives or the employer organizations on the other side. So, there is lot of actors or factors which contribute to making the industrial relations a very complex arena. So, it ensures a proper mechanism to manage industrial disputes and conflicts. You must have also studied in industrial relations the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, in which there are specific provisions related to what constitutes a dispute and what are the various levels or the agencies which can help settlement of disputes. So, that is what you already know. Now, we have in this paper, because everything is based on the strategic objectives of the organizations, every concept is being related to the strategy of the organization. So, we have added a word strategic to industrial relations here, and strategic industrial relations is an approach for analyzing the strategic choices made by the actors, the employers, workers and their organization and policy makers in industrial relations systems, and the implications of those choices for the industrial relations outcome. So, this definition which we have mentioned of industrial relations can be, you can see it in little parts, and then you will be able to understand what it means. See, basically we have already discussed that industrial relations is the relations which exist between the employers, their organizations, the employees, their organizations and the government, right. So, whatever decisions, whatever choices these parties make, they have an implication in deciding what will be the relationship between the management and the employees. So, for example, if the government comes up with a legal provision which kind of safeguards the employers, then what will happen, that the employees feel insecure, employees feel that their rights have been violated. So, there is lot of tension and stress in the organization. Similarly, if the government comes up with a legal provision wherein it is favorable to the employees, then in that case the employers feel that it is not good for them, or it is unfair to them, and then also there is tension and conflict, there can be a tension or conflict. So, strategic industrial relations is an approach for analyzing the strategic choices out of the various options which are available to the employer or to the employees, which option they are taking up. So, strategic choices made by the actors which we have already discussed. These actors are the employers, workers and their organization, and policy makers, that is the government and the government authorities in industrial relations systems, and the implications of those choices for industrial relations relations outcome. So, what is the result, what is the consequence of whatever decisions each party is taking on the entire scenario of industrial relations. Strategic industrial relations is based on the premise that these actors deliberately choose the strategies and institutional structures that they believe will best facilitate attainment of their objectives. Obviously, the assumption which is taken, premise or assumption which is taken in strategic industrial relations is the fact that each of these parties will deliberately, compulsorily, with lot of rationality take a decision or take an option which they believe will best lead to the attainment of their own objectives. Every company needs an effective IR strategy, but many are not sure how to formulate it. So, obviously, all companies would have been doing great, there would have not been any strikes, lockouts, any sort of industrial disputes if every industry or if every company knew how to make an effective strategic IR strategy. Though every company aspires for it, every company wants to achieve it. Strategic IR involves an enterprise developing a policy statement on IR management that has the total support of the management. So, first of all, there should be a clarity on what we want to achieve through this entire system of strategic IR. So, there should be a policy document, how things will be done, what is right, what will be considered wrong, right. So, and in this the management should also be involved fully, otherwise if there is no lack of support of management, the entire concept is going to fail. Then defining responsibilities for IR management within the enterprise. So, who will be responsible for what activities related to IR, who will be responsible for maintaining discipline, who will be responsible for collective bargaining, who will represent the employer, who will represent the employee, who will take care of the grievances at different levels. So, these responsibilities should be clear. Identifying resources and procedures for implementing required industrial relations management measures. Then having planning processes in place that enable identification of potential IR issues and facilitate the development of measures to minimize impacts. So, there should be a system, like we have an intelligence system which tells us in terms of law and order where things can go wrong, right. So, there is internal hidden information which comes to us. Similarly, in an organization also there should be an intelligence system which should help us which should help a company to know beforehand that where things may go wrong, where there can be some issues which may be cropping up, and before they assume a bigger magnitude, they can be just addressed, and so that their impact, a negative influence on the organization, negative outcomes can be minimized, they can be curtailed as much as possible. And establishing procedures to monitor the implementation of measures which support the IR strategy and to initiate corrective action when required. So, whenever we are making a strategy, it is basically a type of a plan. So, not only we have to start with certain objectives, and we also have to have a inbuilt control system which kind of ensures that with whatever objectives, with whatever mindset, or with whatever goal we started that system, we initiated that system, are those goals being achieved or not, and where the problem is lying and how that problem can be corrected, all those things should be inbuilt in the system. So, that is what is the last part of when we are developing a strategic IR in the organization. Now, factors influencing IR strategy. Whenever a company is developing its IR strategy, it should know, because again it will be a dynamic thing, it will keep on changing from time to time. But what are the factors we should keep in mind while formulating a particular strategy for IR in the organization? So, there are employee relations are influenced by many factors, all of which affect the strategic balance between employers and employees. So, any we have discussed earlier also, any decision, any option taken by one party can have lot of implications on the other party. So, there has to be a fine balance. Two set of factors, internal as well as external, influence an IR strategy. So, we will take up the external and internal factors one by one. The internal factors are those factors which come from within the organization. Attitudes of management to employees and unions. So, IR strategy will depend on how far the management believes in industrial democracy, how far it believes in employee participation, workers participation, how far it believes that grievances of workers should be addressed, how far workers should have a representation in discussing anything with the management, how far there is an open system of grievance handling. So, this will decide the IR strategy. Attitudes of employees to management. So, how employees feel about the management, do they think that the management is biased, or it does not take care of the workers' needs, it is indifferent, or is it very concerned, very caring about the workers, and they are totally unbiased in their approach. Then the attitudes of employees to unions. So, obviously, how employees take unions as that, whether the union leaders are really concerned about their problems, their issues, or just because they want to gain power in the organization, that is why they have taken up the union leadership. So, that is also very important. Inevitability of the differences of opinion between management and union. So, what is the level of, there will be certain difference between management and unions, that is but natural, but to what extent those differences can be sorted out, they are natural, or they are so much elevated that it is very difficult to find a solution to those differences. The extent to which the management can or wants to exercise absolute authority to enforce decisions affecting the interest of the employees. So, whether the power is, authority is totally centralized with the management, or in areas or in issues which are affecting workers, workers are allowed, or their representatives are allowed to take certain decisions or to give their suggestions. Then further, the internal factors are the present and likely future strength of the union. So, how far workers are joining the unions, what is their numbers, and what is their projected strength, extent to which there is one dominating union or the existence of multiple unions leading to inter-union rivalry. You must be knowing that in an organization, in a company, there can be multiple unions, and a worker has a choice to join any one of them or all of them. So, that is his very sweet will. So, if there are multiple unions, workers do have a choice, but there is lot of tensions and conflicts among the union members and among the union leaders also, that can be a problem, and that can be not good for the workers, their rights. Extent to which effective and agreed procedures for discussing and resolving grievances or handling disputes exists within the company. This is very important, because if grievances are not handled properly or not handled timely, then again they can aggravate and they can lead to a lot of problems in the organization. There can be high turnover, high absenteeism, a high rate of attrition, low morale, low productivity, lot of accidents in the organization. The effectiveness of managers and supervisors in dealing with problems and disputes related to IR. So, whenever a conflict arises or is about to arise, how quickly the managers, how effective they are, how good they are in handling those situations, and just you can say putting water on the fire which is about to increase in size. The prosperity of the company, the degree to which it is expanding, stagnating, or running down, and the extent to which technological changes are likely to affect employment conditions limitations and opportunities. This is also very important, because if the organization, if the company is a growing company, it is earning a lot of revenue, its profits are increasing, its future is looking very bright, then the level of problems which the company will face will be lower, because people would like to stay with the company, people will like to be a part of its success journey. But when the company's graph is coming down, growth chart is coming down, in that case the company will face a lot of problems, because the company will not be able to give increments, increases, maybe other benefits which were earlier given to the employees, and as a result that there can be lot of conflicts. External factors are the militancy of the unions nationally or locally. So, how strong the unions are throughout the country. So, if the unions are very, very strong throughout the country, then even in that particular company also the unions will wield a lot of power. Effectiveness of the union and its officials, and the extent to which the officials can and do control the activities of supervisors within the company. So, if the union is so strong that even the supervisor or the management, so called representatives of the management, they cannot speak anything or they cannot defy the wishes of the union, then in that case the IR strategy will take a totally different shape. Authority and effectiveness of the employers association. So, if the employers association is very strong, in that case also workers will have a tough time. Extent to which bargaining is carried out at national, local or plant level. So, if the bargaining is carried out at national level, then the union's power will be much stronger in case in comparison to when it is carried out at a plant level. So, that is, and as I said that if the employers association is very, very strong, then workers cannot fight much for their rights, because in case if they are thrown out of that company, then they may not find employment in any other company also, because of the strength of the employers association. The effectiveness of any national or local procedure agreements that may exist. The employment and pay situation nationally and locally. So, if the employment and pay situation around the country or around the state is very, very favorable, very, very good, then there will be a different picture of the IR strategy. But if the wages are low throughout the country, then the workers do not have that much of strength to fight for their salaries. Legal framework within which the IR exists. So, what are the laws? The laws are pro management, or the laws pro workers. Like for example, in our country the laws are pro workers, because workers have been exploited for such a long time. So, most of the laws will favor the workers. So, so obviously when we are formulating an IR strategy, we can't overlook the laws. Then we come to the perspectives of IR strategy. There are 3 perspectives of IR strategy. So, when we are designing an IR strategy, you can have a unitarism approach or the perspective, in which the organization is perceived as an integrated and harmonious whole with the ideal of one happy family, where management and other members of the staff all share a common purpose, emphasizing mutual cooperation. So, that means workers and management do not have different purposes, they have the same goal, that is the prosperity and the growth of the organization, because there in it lies the prosperity of both the parties. So, the key concept here is one happy family. Now, in pluralism, just opposite of being treating oneself as a unit, the organization is perceived as being made up of powerful and divergent subgroups, each with its own legitimate loyalties and with their own set of objectives and leaders. In particular, the 2 predominant subgroups in the pluralist perspective are the management and trade unions, both of which we are wielding lot of power. So, here it is quite different from the other approach, other perspective, wherein the management and the workers, they are seen as 2 different and divergent subgroups, right. They are moving in 2 different directions, whereas in unitarism they are just moving together. And the third perspective is the radical perspective, in which the employment relationship is an entirely illegitimate relationship which exists solely to satisfy the interest of the dominant party. So, in this there is always a party which has an upper hand over the other party. So, it is kind of illegal, because in an IR system both the parties should be on an equal footing ideally. So, if one party is enjoying more power or the dominant position over the other party, then that means it is not the right kind of an perspective, but there are countries where this approach works, or it is there. So, this is the radical perspective, whereas there is a employment relationship in which there is only one dominant party and the entire strategy is designed in order to satisfy the interest of that party. So, now we come to the industrial relations strategies. Building a strong employee relation strategy involves creating an environment that delivers what both parties want and in the long run leads to competitive advantage. So, what is the purpose of making a strategy? We want to, with any strategy, we want to achieve competitive advantage. We want to achieve the strategic goals of the organization. So, the same thing applies to the IR strategy also. Now, so we have to design IR strategies in such a way that it leads to the competitive advantage for the organization. Now, this is possible only when workplace issues are negatively affecting employees are identified and addressed. So, what should IR do? IR should work in such a way that anything any sort of conflict, any sort of friction which is likely to occur between employer and employees is addressed beforehand, or it does not arise at all. So, that is why with that objective the IR strategies have to be designed, so that everything is harmonious and peaceful in the organization and the organization is able to achieve competitive advantage. Now, a case in point is of automatic stampings and assemblies limited employees union at Bhosari. They created a sensation when they wrote to the management suo moto, that is on their own without any external pressure or something, that they will increase productivity first and then seek increase in salary. Now, this is a perfect example of a unitarism approach, wherein both the parties, the management and the employees, they are looking together in the same direction, and the union or the employees have the guts, they have the courage to say that they will only work, when they work enough to increase the productivity, to increase the profitability of the organization, then only will they look for increase in their salary. Effective IR strategies includes the following. What are those? First is reaching agreements, because if there are conflicts, if there are disputes and they are allowed to simmer over a long period of time, the entire working of the organization is affected. So, it is important, it is imperative that disputes are handled as soon as possible, agreements are reached as soon as possible. Some organizations have unions or collective bargaining units that require management to negotiate rates of compensation, benefits and working conditions. In IR, emotions often run high, creating huge roadblocks, because it is a matter of salary, it is a matter of workers' pride, it is a matter of the working conditions. So, or it is a matter of a worker's grievance which he feels is very, very genuine and should be addressed ASAP. So, there is high level of emotions which are associated in an IR scenario, and because of that many times people are not able to behave rationally or to think rationally. So, building consensus is nowhere as important as in industrial relations. So, it is very important, as I said, to reach consensus, to reach agreements as soon as possible, otherwise then it can have a very, very bad spillover effect. In January 1956, Tata Steel signed an agreement with their employees union. This was a landmark agreement because it recognized clearly the mutual responsibilities and obligations of both the parties. it set the tone for industrial relations. This settlement has had tremendous influence on the work culture of Tata Steel. The chapters of the agreement are mutual security, closer association of employees with management, productivity, job description, job evaluations and wage structure, revision of wages and gratuity. In fact, the concept of gratuity or gratuity payment was introduced in Tata Steel first, and then the government of India came up with the Payment of Gratuity Act later. So, Tata is such a forward looking organization, and so much of concern for the workers thing, their requirements and their demands. So, that is the thing they have made an all inclusive agreement, so that there are no problems in the future. And as a result of that, Tata Steel has not seen strikes, right. So, because of the reaching, so that the industrial relations have been very, very cordial. Then proactive versus reactive. In organizations without IR strategy, the approach to solving labor issues is more ad hoc, because if you do not have a policy statement related to IR, you do not have a strategy related to IR, what will happen? Whenever an issue will crop up, you will try to handle it there and then. So, you have to have a very, very proactive approach. Then next is employee effective communication, because transparency is very important, and in this paper we have discussed much about transparency. And this is the case of Asian Paints plant near Hyderabad, wherein the president of the union was invited to explain to him the policy. So, that is a perfect example of how transparency can help. And then there should be a sound disciplinary procedure, because it is very important, because otherwise the employees who are disciplined, they feel demotivated because others are indisciplined. So, there should be a system of rewards and punishments for employees who are disciplined and who are not disciplined. So, this is how by formulating strategies in these different areas, there can be a very, very good way of handling industrial relations, and that could lead to competitive advantage for the organization. Thank you.